we're centralized. We are as vulnerable as we have ever been as a nation. And it's our food supply. Human beings, this is what we're trying to get people to understand. Human beings need three things: food, shelter, safety. We need those three basic things, and most people aren't paying attention to that, right? They need their TikTok, they need their Netflix streaming, they need their Disney account, they need their Amazon Prime. Like, that's the things they're thinking about. But I'm like, you guys have no idea how vulnerable our supply chain is still. Like, after COVID, I would estimate that we're only about 75% recovered as a whole for a supply chain post-COVID. And we're still on shaky ground. So long term, yes, I have optimism. I think long term, people in this country will do what people in this country have always done. They rose to the occasion, they rallied, and they went to work.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, Tone.
Good morning, Bear.
All right, so today we have two really cool guests. We have Brooke Ence and AJ Richards. Some of you might remember Brooke from the CrossFit years, back when she made her breakout in the CrossFit Games and then became a very kind of influential fitness influencer on social media. But Brooke is a native of St. George, Utah. As we said, accomplished athlete, became an actress, entrepreneur with a deep passion for her family, the business, the ranching, and agriculture. She grew up kind of in a rural area in Utah and kind of developed a strong love for the outdoors and appreciation for hard work and resilience. AJ is a combat veteran entrepreneur and is the CEO of Sustenance Earth, which is the organization we're going to get into. And, you know, it's kind of together, they're standing this thing up, and the commitment is basically to provide a platform for all access to healthy food, preserving the land, and supporting farmers and ranchers across the nation. And of course, they're going to do this way more justice than I am, but kind of with an emphasis on the importance of supporting local agriculture and strengthening the connection between consumers and the land. So I know you guys will do that way more justice, and there's so much we need to peel back from that. But you two, welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Thanks you for having us.
And before we get into the farm stuff, which I know Tony is chomping at the bit to get into, you know, Brooke, I quickly want to start with you. You know, I think a lot of our audience kind of knows you originally as the CrossFit OG. You kind of made that rookie breakout year, and everyone's like, "Who's this jacked blonde girl?" You know, that like is kind of like you came out of. I mean, from my optic, you kind of came out of nowhere, and then you were kind of from one of the first kind of mega influencers, right? Before that was really like a big thing, and now everyone wants to be that. So you had a huge reach on social media, and I know a lot of women looked up to you, and you were kind of, you were showcasing fitness through your platform, and you still do that, obviously, and it's been really cool to see that. But then you kind of took this pivot, at least it appeared to be a pivot, and as I know you now, like that you were always kind of a rancher in Utah, and that was always your thing, going to rodeos and things like that. But from kind of the people that just observe you through social media, like, oh, what happened to Brooke? She left the CrossFit Games, and now she's like got a cowgirl hat on and, going to rodeos, and you know what I mean? So I guess walk me through quickly kind of that journey, how you broke out into the scene, and was the kind of influencer thing intentional, or, did the CrossFit Games kind of catapult you into that kind of a trajectory? And then you're like, holy crap, I have 1 million followers. Like, how did this happen? So just kind of walk me through that. And then what ultimately led to where you are right now, ranching in Utah, and then we'll obviously get into the feed the people thing.
Okay. For anyone who is like, yeah, why are you not working out anymore? You guys, I work out. I never pivoted. What I care about, what I love, never changed. I love fitness. I love being healthy. I love being able to learn and play new sports. I like being active. I've always been active. I played sports all growing up. I danced through college, and I always wanted to be a rodeo queen. Always. I sang at the rodeo every year growing up. My mom would dose me with Benadryl. We'd go to the rodeo. I'd sing, and then she'd take me home, because when I was little, my allergies were so bad that I'd go and sing. And usually at our rodeo, when we're out singing, anyone can kind of ride their horses in the arena. So people will come that aren't even in the rodeo, and they'll bring the horses and they'll ride. And as soon as that dust kicked up, my allergies were so bad that my eyes would swell shut. I mean, kind of funny, but it was awful. And as I grew up, I definitely got through a lot of those allergies, so it's not as bad. So we have horses. We've had horses my whole life. We have a ranch. I just got my first horse and I've been working her. And my goal is to be able to show her reining cow horse. And I also would love to get into roping and tie down and, have some fun doing barrels. And also, this one is what surprises people. I really would like to try bulldogging. So if you guys don't know what bulldogging is, it's steer wrestling. I think I would need a really small steer because I'm not as strong as I used to be. But the thing is I didn't stop competing because I was over it or because I really wanted to pivot. I had a cervical fusion. So I have a plate and 4 screws in my neck. I got through that a year of, that was in March 31st, 2017. And then I competed in 2018. I dealt with shoulder issues, labrum tears, things like that, especially from my cervical fusion. I had so much atrophy in my body, in my upper body, that all of those became issues. So now, like when I'd get a little inflamed, I no longer had that muscle mass to protect it. So everything would affected me more. I can't do as much with my upper body without getting so tight, so locked up through my neck, through my traps, through my upper back, through my shoulders, and then down through my arms. And I had spinal cord damage. So my grip strength is nowhere near what it used to be. And I'm just kind of working through that. Nerve regeneration just takes time. There's no specific amount of time or exercise that you can do to speed it up. But that is why I don't compete anymore. I did compete one more year. And after competition in 2018, my shoulders were so bad, I went in to have my shoulders checked. And I decided that's kind of also a year when CrossFit was kind of in a really, just another real weird transition phase. And so I kind of decided, you know what, I'm not going to push myself, because I had told my surgeon and my shoulder surgeon in California, I was like, listen, I can do this. Let's just fix it. Let's do both of them. I was in a neck brace and I wanted to have both my shoulders done because I'm like, I can't afford to have to recover for too long, because we just keep training, right? You just keep training, we keep getting better, you keep getting better. It's this long compound effect. And I was getting so behind from surgery and from recovering. And my doctor said, if you do it, he's like, the chances of you having to do it again, so shoulder surgery, he's like, very high. And to him, for me, I was like, I know multiple people, like Sam Briggs. Okay. I know multiple people, friends of mine, that are killer athletes and they've had surgery and come back and been just fine and jumped right into competition. He swore to me that would not be the case. And even if it was, the chances of me having to do surgery again were very high. And then all the things were happening through just the organization. And so I decided I'm not going to compete this year. I don't want to be in a point where I no longer get to try new things or play new sports, right? Or be active. I want a dirt bike. I like snowboarding. I want to jump out of airplanes. I love horseback riding. I want to do bulldogging. And I can't do that if I'm extra broken. So again, I love competing. If I wouldn't have had surgery, I would have competed for at least a few more years for sure. That's a very hard, I guess, business to get out of. When you have this routine built into your life, it's very hard to all of a sudden be like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. You always go to the gym. So then it's like, I go to the gym. Well, how do I not work out twice a day? How do I not do this much intensity? Where can I cut back my volume so I can just do it to be healthy and fit, but I'm not trying to compete. So for me, it's almost like it was a very sad, very hard life experience that I had to endure. But I think because it sort of forced me that that year I had surgery, it forced me to sit on the bench. I didn't want to. I mean, it was a very hard pill to swallow. But when I did that, and once I had surgery and my mind had got over this hurdle, now I was on the other side of it and I could just start recovering. I was able to be like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this time, because when I'm healthy, I will no longer have there's no excuse I can give as to why I'm not in the gym or why I'm not working hard on something. And so that's when I started, leaning into business stuff that I was working on and that I was very, I thought about all the time and opportunities. And I took the time to do that. In terms of ranching and doing it as a business, and now what me and AJ are doing with From the Farm and Feed the People, it all started with AJ calling me. Quick note, and AJ can give more information, but we are distant relatives. We are from the same hometown, and our families were two of not very many that settled the area, people that first came here and settled the area. And we started talking about beef, and he was at the time working for, actually, AJ, go ahead and you tell him what you were doing.
Yeah, we were working on setting up a direct consumer meat company, and then working with some other, ready-made milled providers. And so knowing that Brooke was from the area and was kind of here a lot more, I knew she was in a transition phase, didn't know all the stuff she was going through or working through, but just reached out and said, do you want to team up and get to work on something? In the meantime, I was working on a whole separate project that I didn't have, I guess, the confidence to tell her about yet, which we'll get into more. And that was 2020. And then things have evolved for both of us since then.
And I will say, I did move home. So I am back in Utah. I moved home from California in 2021, and just think some things drastically changed for me business wise. And I was on my way out of town. I was going to be gone for like a month and a half. And I called my realtor. I had just moved into the house I had bought. And I was like, can you sell my house? She said yes. And so while I was gone, my best friend, they showed my house. They did the whole thing and sold it. And then I got home and flew out there with my mom, got my U-Haul, gave away a ton of my stuff to like my friends, my best friend's daughter who was moving out of her house for the first time, and then loaded up a U-Haul and drove home. And man, is life just so much better out here. Except for I do miss my friends, but I love Utah, Southern Utah.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't miss some of the California shenanigans, I bet. I'll leave it at that. Well, we're really excited about this topic because I think it's something that, I think has huge significance. So I don't want to steal your all's thunder, but walk me through, kind of how Feed the People was established and what need is it solving, and what is the bigger issue at hand here when it comes to farmland and sourcing food in America?
So when I first reached out to Brooke, we were, COVID hadn't started yet. We were just looking at building a direct consumer brand that would really end up supporting a lot of the producers in the Southern Utah area. Because if you grow direct to consumer, you end up having or needing to aggregate from other producers just to keep up with volume, which is a great scenario when it's, built with integrity and egos are left aside and you're really trying to make a bigger impact, right? Like ButcherBox did $600 million in revenue last year. If that company sourced entirely from American producers, which they're all foreign, unfortunately, but if they source from American producers, the volume of love that you could spread across all of these American ranchers would be incredible, and everybody wins from that. So, this was pre-COVID, and we were just looking to build a great business that would support a lot of people that fed that ecosystem. And then, I started with my family's ranch. My family are fifth generation ranchers. They, like Brooke's saying, they settled this area as well. A place called the Arizona Strip, north side of the Grand Canyon, about 60 miles south of St. George, where we are. And so I started selling beef for my family's operation. Well, then COVID hit, and I called to schedule my next round of slaughter for our customers because we had a growing, especially after COVID hit. People were like, "Oh shit!" and they started ordering, like crazy. And we're really just doing it locally. So I reached out to my local slaughterhouse to schedule my next round of slaughter, and they're like, "Yeah, we can get you in 12 to 18 months." Previously to that, it was like you call and like, "Yeah, we can get you in a week." It was no big deal. COVID hit and the entire supply chain just fell apart. It just crumbled. I mean, if people think back, we have such short memories. If you think back to the news clips, millions of gallons of milk being dumped in the fields and pigs being lined up along a pit and just slaughtered and they culled the herds. All of these major disruptions were going on with our supply chain, and people just have no idea how centralized we have become and how it's just really set us up for a major possible failure in our country. I mean, on a scale that we haven't seen in decades. So anyway, I call him like, oh shit, what the hell? So I start driving around the entire state of Utah, just getting our beef slaughtered wherever we could squeeze in. And then that ended up producing a whole nother list of issues, which was, not every slaughterhouse is the same. So we go to one place and they send it to me in different packaging. And my what you guys are in business and in branding, people want consistency. When it shows up, they want to know it's consistent because that's reliability. Well, I've got some that's paper wrapped and some that's vacuum sealed and some that's, a rib steak is now called a ribeye, even though it's the same thing, but customers don't know all of these things. And so we just had all of these issues. So I shut it down. I'm like, the margins in meat are so slim as it is. Like, I can't be driving all day long to pick up my animals when the margins aren't there to begin with. So I took a step back, but while this was happening, I'm listening to the news talking about empty store shelves and people, it's this major dominating topic. And I'm thinking, I'm driving down this rural road and I see beef standing in the field on 4 legs everywhere. And I'm like, the issue is not that we don't have food in this country. The issue is that we fucked up and we destroyed our supply chain by putting it in the hands of 4 dudes. Right. And so I just kind of had this light bulb aha moment.
2 of which that aren't from here.
And who are those 4 dudes?
JBS, Cargill, Tyson, and National Beef. Those are those 4 corporations control 85% of our beef supply chain. 85%, and 2 of them are foreign operated, JBS and Tyson. JBS is a Brazilian-owned company, and Tyson is China. And so
that's interesting.
That's who dominates 85% of our meat supply chain right now. So I have this aha moment. I'm like, what if we built a software that's like Airbnb, but instead of short-term rentals, you can open it and through geolocation instantly populate everybody around you who's growing and selling food direct. Because there's just a disconnect between urban and rural communication. Like, but we rely on each other. The rural community, we don't understand the first thought about what's going through the minds of people in major cities. But that's who's buying the food. That's who is buying from me and my ranching and farming family friends. In the urban environments, they think everybody out in the country is a bunch of redneck hillbillies that aren't very bright, but they forget that that's who's sourcing, that's where your food is coming from by and large.
It's also where everyone came from.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how everyone lived.
We're only 2 generations away from that. Whoever's the most city slicker person you could ever meet is only 2 generations away from being on the farm. But that's how fast we have forgotten. So anyway, have this idea. So then I go to Brooke and I'm like, hey, I'm working on something else that I want to talk to you about if you're interested. And she's like, yeah. And I told her, she's like, oh yeah, I'm in. Let's go for it. And so that's this app that we call From the Farm.
And AJ, how did this desire, kind of rewinding a little bit, even before the direct consumer, before you created that, how did you land on this? I know you said it was like a 5th generation farm. Had that legacy built principles that you were then just carrying on, or did you kind of even go against what had been done on your ranch prior to that? Because, and that, Brooke, I actually think I heard you talking about it on another podcast. Like, there's a newer generation that's getting into, and you guys, is regenerative, like that word, I'm sure you guys, would you consider yourself in the regenerative space to some degree?
Some degree, yeah.
Okay.
We're highly encouraged by that, but we also believe that every small family farm and ranch, however they operate, needs to be supported.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And there was the question I was trying to get to. Did you was this just something that had lived on in your family, or did you have nuanced ideas that you actually brought to your ranch, and then obviously it sounded like you started to turn that into a business? So can you walk through a little bit? How did these thoughts swirl in your head initially?
Yeah, that's a great question. So initially, actually, it was the impact on our ecosystem that I was more concerned about. It wasn't this whole parallel economy and improving the bottom line of the producer. I wasn't there yet. I didn't have that rattling around in my brain. Really what I had was, when I went to Iraq, the first time I went, we took, care packages into a small village and it was a lot of food and stuff like that, and we handed them out to the people there. And I remember seeing this guy standing off in the corner, and I don't know what he was thinking, but in my head, because I've got a brand new baby girl at home, in my head, I'm thinking other men are feeding my family. Like, I don't want to be that guy, right? And so COVID hit, and all I could think of was this dude's face. Like, shit, what would happen if I'm close to being that guy that has to count on other people to feed my family, you know? So I'm just like, and really it's because I was seeing like the desertification that is happening. Like, we do have an issue with our farming practices. It's not, I don't believe in global warming. I don't believe in the climate change bullshit narrative. So you kind of have to bear with me in how I describe this, because that's, people automatically jump to like conclusions. Desertification is a thing, and it is happening because of management issues, but those management issues are caused by the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of the Interior, and their management, their belief of what proper management is. And that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down. But so I then I come across Alan Savory's TED Talk, and Alan Savory is the founder of the Savory Institute that I highly encourage people to go check out. Alan Savory TED Talk. This guy completely is restoring desertification in Africa and doing it with natural processes. So I'm like, oh shit. You know, my family, when they went out to the Arizona Strip and homesteaded, they're the Bundy Ranchers, by the way. So if you look up Bundy Ranchers take on the BLM, or Bundy Ranchers, you know, federal government, you're going to see all kinds of stuff. That's my family. And I watched them go to war against a corrupt federal government. They were like the early whistleblowers of, you know, they're coming after us. And so I try to go to my family and say, hey, there's this new practice. And I tried to, you know, encourage them about regenerative, because our historical journal writings said that we went out to the Arizona Strip and grass was stirrup high, you know, stirrup on a saddle, and we could throw seeds in the ground and dry farm and everything would just grow. Then 5 years later, the journals changed. The rain cycles stopped. They couldn't grow things on a consistent basis. The grass wasn't growing like it used to. They didn't understand that they had broken inadvertently the cycles of nature that was allowing for all of this growth. And so I'm like, oh man, holy crap, I just discovered something new. These guys are going to be so excited. That's
And
not
they were
true.
like, no.
They're like, what do you know? You know, I'm the city slicker cousin, just so you know, just to be clear. I grew up doing the ranching and the cattle drives. I didn't wake up and do the chores. So here comes city slicker cousin AJ with some fancy new idea about ags. It's gonna save us all. You know, I'm so naive. But really yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, it's just interesting because like what you're describing to me, and here's the what Bear mentioned, the nerd in me going to come out is it blows my mind as a country, and then as just a human, like as an American and as a species, our unwillingness to look at things that are right in front of us. And I truly think in 10 years, we will look back and say, what the hell did we do to our soils? And it's already happening.
Yes.
And individuals like yourself, I think, are the pioneers in that world where it's the climate change and all these things. There's all these smoke screens of like drawing our attention to that, when right in front of us, our water supply, our soils are being degraded to a point where it's not sustainable. And that's sad, because if that folds, not only do we become so reliant on external sources, you're removing the power from your people then more and more. And that's
Yes.
the centralization you talked about initially. So it's one, when you start to dig into it, and it sounds like you went through this, you sound like the crazy guy, like shouting from the rooftops. But then what I love, and it's why I'm so appreciative of what you guys are doing, is what used to be a crazy thought 10 years ago now is getting talked about more and more and more. And of course, as with any nuanced good idea, there's going to be strong resistance to that. And you're seeing that as well. So it is an interesting battle. And I told Bear before we went live, like what's so encouraging to me is somebody who grew up on a farm, and then even now, like you've probably heard of Polyface Farms, Joel Salatin.
Oh, yeah.
He's a big name in the industry. I'm able to buy my meat from there, and raw milk. Even here in Virginia Beach, there's a huge community of people that are saying, like, and I probably have 20 friends who do it, and there's a bunch of local farms that you can buy a cow or a cow share in order to get raw milk. So just to see kind of the thing picking up more and more momentum is so encouraging to me. But, and you guys would know this way more intimately than I would, it's not going to be it's not an easy path to walk. And there's a lot of things, and I love what you said about it's not about flipping the food industry on its head. That actually is an unrealistic and ungrounded approach to this, at least in my opinion. It's what you said earlier of create parallel systems that slowly pull away from that so that in 10 years we look back and say, yeah, like fuck that old model, we've moved out of that. But it's a transition that can actually take place in a real kind of stepwise fashion, as opposed to just, yeah, let's flip it on its head, this is the new thing. That's actually a kind of an immature way to look at it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And that's exactly what it was. You know, my wife's cousin is married to this gentleman. His name is Neil Spackman. And if you go look up the Al Baida project in Saudi Arabia, this guy was contracted to go and lead this operation. And it was an operation to take a completely degraded piece of land. Like I'm talking, not a single piece of vegetation as far as you can see. And the ground was all these little tiny boulders because it was so degraded. He interviewed in this documentary, he interviewed this old timer out there, and he said there used to be trees as wide as oil drums. Like this whole place was a forest. And so this wasn't natural. You would look at it and be like, oh, it's always been that way. No, man fucked it up. Like even in Iraq, I went back to Iraq as a contractor and ended up sitting next to the guy that ran the entire General Electric for the whole country and was an Iraqi born and raised citizen. And he said, Iraq used to be a wetland. Like we've lost entire civilizations because Saddam Hussein was so worried about Kuwait that he dammed off the water tributaries, dried up the entire wetlands, and now it's a desert. It used to not be a desert. So one dude who was crazy changed an entire landscape, right? And so we look around and we assume that's what it used to look like. But ultimately, what I'm getting to is this. What he discovered in that project was we can go back and plant these trees, but we have to understand what led to that. And what led to that was economic decline. So people are starving and they don't have power and natural gas to do any cooking. So they go and level their forests so they can sell it to make money so they can feed their family. So you have to look at, it's what Savory says, you know, everything works as a whole in nature. It's if you try to engineer it, which is the whole Bill Gates problem, you know, an engineer sees problem A, solution B, point A to point B, distance B, you know, shortest distance. Let's just go for that and fucking pump carbon out of the atmosphere into an underground storage tank. It's because it's an engineered thought process, but it's nature as a whole. So what we have to do, and this is where the app came in, is if we create a parallel economy where you can be paid more to do your job, now that's how we influence this other activity. So if I can help you earn more revenue on your operation, now you'll listen to ways that we might be able to introduce you to make more revenue. You know, like a regenerative producer, a good friend of mine, for example, Northern Utah, McMurdy Ranch, they've been doing regenerative for 5 years. They've cut out probably $250,000 of inputs. And that's inputs, fertilizers and fuels and all of these extra costs and herbicides and fungicides and pesticides. They don't need it anymore. They're increasing their forage. They're increasing the yield they can grow on their operation with decreasing their inputs. So these guys are now economically viable. We as citizens want our farmers and ranchers to be economically viable. Otherwise we lose them. And then we have to look to the government to feed us. That's the worst case scenario. We don't want that.
Just a ton there that I'm completely aligned with as far as like I call it like scientific reductionism, where we love to look at little pieces of things that are actually a very complex kind of system. And we get so honed in on those things that we think we can just manipulate those for an outcome, but then we don't look at the lateral effects it has on the system as a whole. And that's, as a species, we're really bad at that. And I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that like, hey, we can't keep doing this. Like we cannot keep focusing on one variable, solving for that, and then not seeing the 18 other things that it's affecting downstream. And this, I think this is a literal perfect example of that. And you're right. Like individuals like Bill Gates, when you hear them talk about things, it's like, I see what you're getting at. And I'm not somebody that thinks they have like this grand evil plan. I just think they view their perception of the world is extremely different and almost non-holistic in a way it's causing detriments and ripple effects through our society, which is why then they get perceived as these kind of masterminds. It's just a differing way of thinking. And I love what you said about like, there's an intelligence to this earth. And when you just observe it and then try to mimic those through our behavior, in my opinion, there's a dance that takes place where you're not having to force things onto nature. Now, I know that sounds lofty and that sounds like almost too good to be true, but there's plenty of examples of that. And the one you just gave about creating like ecosystems on retaining water, and then watch what happens. If you retain water within an environment, watch what happens as far as the flourishing of the plants, the animals, the fauna. And yet we just ignore that and think that, no, man needs to come in there. We grow one crop, we strip it, we fertilize it every year. But then you look at the soils and they've lost almost 100% of the nutrient profile and micro minerals that are in the plants. So yeah, I'm rambling as well, but completely aligned kind of with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
And what's Bill Gates doing? Because isn't he like buying up all the farmland? And isn't he trying to like, did Tony, weren't you
It's
saying?
so funny because I posted something and it was talking about Bill Gates and someone messaged me and they're like, there's only this much farmland that he owns. And in America, there's this much. Like, calm down. And I'm thinking, do you think that it's a good idea for him to own any of it? Does he have any experience being a steward of the land? Does he know anything about it? I mean, already it's like, wait, Bill Gates is talking about healthcare. Wait, are you a doctor?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And what's so crazy is people, we forget. Like it's someone who you're like, oh, they're important. And then as they just talk about stuff, you're like, yeah, that's right. That makes sense. And it's like, wait a second. Did you go to school for this? Wait, why are we listening to you? Oh, because you have a lot of money? Oh, because you're good with your money.
Well, and that like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think that's those guys at times I think are examples of that where I don't know if I can conclude that, and I just said this, but that they have some evil master plan. But what I do think to be true is that they've reached a level of influence and power that the same way I know a lot of really successful dumb people, it's that like they're viewing it through their lens and then they actually have the influence to make changes that individuals on the ground roots are saying like, you don't know what we're doing. Like, why are you deciding this? Like, you have no clue what you're doing. But in their head, they've convinced themselves. And he's a great example. Like, if you start to peel back the layers on like vaccines in Africa, like there are a lot of heinous things
it's messed.
Yes, and this isn't woo woo tinfoil cap. This is confirmed. Like there is plenty of evidence to support this. But you can trace it back to what he thought the reasoning was. Now, once again, to try to dissect Bill Gates' mind here, I won't even try to do that. But it is fascinating, as you said, Brooke, to see people of power and influence think that they need to be the ones constantly making the decisions for something like our food supply, which that's once again what I love about you guys. It's like that should be within smaller communities. Of course, there's always, at least for the time being, going to be a national kind of supply chain that needs maintained, but that should be with the people in smaller communities where they can control it and they can control the quantity and quality of it.
Well, it's like that is the issue with influence. Okay. This is like brings it full circle why when they started coming out with influencer, I hated it. Because it was like, wait, I'm in a group with all these people that never did anything in their own life, in their business, in their efforts, in their sport, whatever it is, never did anything. They're just cute or pretty and they exercise. And now they're, doing TikTok and they got millions of followers. And I'm like, what did you do? Like, how could you, if you had a conversation with one of your fans, how could you actually change their life? And so you look at like Bill Gates and I think, or even here's a great example during COVID, even now, because we're just deep in the bullshit now.
Yeah. Sound the alarms at Spotify.
You've got
ban us again. Here we go. Let's do it. We're already banned. Let's go.
For real. I just never realized when I lived in California too, when you're the sum of the five people around you, it's like when you're in an environment and everything's kind of playing or everyone's talking about things in a certain way, it's very hard to even be able to understand it in a bigger picture when you're surrounded by emotion, like crazy emotional response and you're being fed all certain information. But in terms of like TV hosts, comedians, Noah, what's his name? Noah something. You
Trevor
just have
Noah?
these people. Yes, but you have these people who their job is influencing. They're comedians, they're talk show hosts, and they get a lot of traction. Tons of people love to watch them. They're entertaining, they're funny, they're smart. They have people on, they have conversation, whatever. At a certain point, did anyone realize that people were getting their news from TV show hosts that are like, again, let's remember the question, how do you know what you're like? Are you educated? Like, what do you do that I should listen to you to tell me like what's right or what's wrong when you're a TV show host? Like, you shouldn't be playing one side if you're a TV show host and have someone on and have a conversation. But at a certain point, it was hard to even know what people's jobs really were. Like, are you a journalist? Are you like, are you always educating yourself? Like, is this a passion of yours? And it's just very hard for people to get the right information. I mean, to just get enough information to be like, okay, how do I feel about it? You know, we have emotional responses to things and then you die on that hill. And I have been there, you know, like and when me and AJ talk too, it's like, you guys, if this upsets you, if you hear something that's like, you immediately get defensive or you get upset, good. But don't just all of a sudden stick to how you feel, because it totally sucks, you know, when you have an emotional response to something, like something really makes you mad or upsets you or whatever. But the truth is, and this is a hard pill to swallow. I swallow it all the time. Every time I get upset about something, just because you feel a certain way does not make it true. It doesn't make that what you experienced or what you think correct. But you have a reason, like everyone's entitled to feel the way we feel. But do we want to keep getting better and more knowledgeable and understand things better? Or do we just want to sit and be a victim and be mad? And that's like, collectively, that's what I feel and see everywhere. Like, not just online, like around town.
Yeah. And
that I think is what needs to change, is people need to be able to take responsibility, know that it's okay if you've been doing something the wrong way. It's okay if you're willing to learn more so you can become better or know more, you know, have a better understanding of what's going on versus just kind of staying where you are, and misery loves company. So if you're around a lot of people that also just don't want to understand things more, they just want to bitch and complain about it, you're going to be stuck in that place for a very long time. And all you got to do is know that it's okay to take responsibility, be accountable, and honestly, relearn critical thinking. Like, people need to critical think way more often.
Well, and to me, it's taking back our personal power, because what you just said to me, that like we create consciously or consciously, we're creating our reality at all times. And so many people want to project out and see what and here's what the power of what you just said, Brooke, is that as soon as you embody that and you flip everything kind of on yourself, and not in a way that you beat yourself up, but that you realize, I'm probably contributing to any environment I find myself in, I helped contribute to that. So if it's really good, you should look at that and say, hey, I've made some right decisions. I've internally reflected in a way that has allowed me to create an environment I feel grounded and safe in. But if you find yourself, and this is like a big indicator for me of somebody who has not reached maybe a level of wisdom or just self-reflection yet, if you're constantly complaining about the people and places and your life's a shit show, there's some internal reflection that has to take place, and there should be grace through that. It's not like you should beat yourself up and say, no. But as a culture, we can start to empower ourselves to say, wait a second, maybe I should stop pointing the finger around and look at what my day looks like, look at what my thoughts look like on a day-to-day basis. As soon as you recognize the power you have to change that, you stop pointing the finger, because you're like, holy shit, there's so many things internally that I need to clean up because I've created this around me. So, but that takes, and you touched on it, that takes an insane level of humility, courage, and also just discipline then to actually stick to it, because our minds are tricky and our thoughts create these stories that are hard to break free from. So yeah, I could not agree more. And I think it does, it relates to all of this. But and Brooke, I would ask you and AJ, are you still optimistic on kind of where we're going as a culture? Because to me, and I'll give you mine, so since you asked, is that although it seems to be bubbling to a head right now, I remain extremely optimistic, because I think, as with any new system, when it's arising, there's going to be a moment of chaos. And I think the internet, social media, COVID, all of these things, although could be viewed as like this big negative kind of thing, I actually think are good because it's bringing things to the surface that we as a people need to address. And that's actually a beautiful thing. Now, it's going to be chaos while you're in it, but there's going to be new things that arise. And I actually think the food thing that you guys are be doing is one of those little branches that's going to arise from it. So I'll get out of my soapbox and ask you guys, do you remain kind of optimistic on the kind of the grander, what we just talked about, Brooke?
I think that I am optimistic. If anyone else, like people that are listening, my optimism comes from if we as a people are optimistic together and we are voting with our dollars and we are fighting the good fight and paying attention to things that are really going on versus being like, I don't want to know about it. I'm just comfortable in my life and I do my stuff. And, I like the government help, like all these things, we the people do have power, but we only have power together. We don't have power when we're separated. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what keeps the people that's in power. They can keep just doing their bullshit and they function outside of real life, and that's where I say, when you talk about this idea, because we don't truly know, right? Is it a grand evil scheme? I mean, I think it is, but I don't think that, maybe it's not in the same way that I perceive it. But again, in my mind, and what I say is it doesn't matter. Okay. You function outside of what real life is for majority of people that live here. They don't abide by the same rules. They don't have the same health care. They don't have to eat the same food. They have underground bunkers. They have top of the line, whatever. They get anything that they need. So it sucks because we are pawns. We don't have a say, but they can make, they can play their game of chess and they still function outside of the real world. But we don't have a say. We are just in it and it sucks and it's uncomfortable. And so the only thing we can do is more people have humility, take responsibility, and just consider. Like if you're someone who's like, I love Bill Gates. Okay, that's fine. You love your computer and he's done a lot of great stuff in his past or whatever and done a lot of evil shit. But all I'm saying is if you can just consider the possibility that whatever someone else is saying, or maybe they're opposing your thought, if you just consider that some of that must have some truth in it, you can now have a conversation with somebody who you don't see eye to eye with. And it's just considering that they're not an idiot, considering that what their opinion or thought is built on came from something worth looking into. It doesn't mean that they're right 100%, but just opening the door to say, I'm going to consider the possibility that what you're saying has some truth. And now I'm going to go and read about it. And I'm going to go look into it. It doesn't need to be this being at opposition constantly, but that is where we're at. If people can understand that, recognize it, and say, okay, let's have a conversation, regardless of our sides or our views or whatever. If we can all agree that we're all in a system that we don't get to really control, we get to control our day to day. We get to vote with our dollars. We get to see where we're paying attention. Like, do we care about our agriculture? We should, because when it's gone, it's gone. We can talk about, and AJ can touch on it, but like the number of processing facilities we even have in the States, not very many.
Yeah.
We have plenty of beef, but if you can't process it and they're importing everything and you've got companies that aren't even from America and they're buying up a bunch of beef and exporting it. The second, if we allow for it to get too crazy and we keep losing our ranchers and producers like at the rate we are losing them right now, we won't have the option to be self-sufficient. It will be gone. And so if you're so far removed from rural life or you're so far removed from our food supply system, it's okay. But if you can just, believe this, it is an issue and we do need to do something about it. It's an issue and we need to do something about it before it's too late. And if you think that it's not really an issue, I'm telling you, it is. And if you think that it's a conspiracy theory of like the extremes that are being talked about and possibilities, just because they seem extreme doesn't mean that you kind of like continue to say, I'll do it next time. I'll order from them next time. I'll help them next time. We don't want to get to the extremes. We don't want to get to a point where we're like, it's over. My
Yeah.
my 5 generation ranch is gone. Everything I ever loved and known is gone. I have no opportunity to be self-sufficient, take care of myself. How am I going to teach my kids these skills that I learned from my mother, from my grandmother? It will be gone. And so I urge you to think about the extreme, because we don't want to get there, but we are on the road to get there. Let's not let that happen. And that's why me and AJ are so passionate about what we do. I have a deep love for my heritage, nostalgia. I love nature. I love horses. I love cows. I just love it. I love it so much. And I know it's not for everybody, but everyone loves good, healthy food. Mm-hmm. Everyone loves to know that what they're eating is good for them. Well, I mean, most people. I'm going to assume that everybody cares about that.
When you talk about optimism, I have optimism in the long-term outcome. Like you were saying, I think it's going to get real uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I have optimism in the long-term result of what's coming. There in 1932 to 33 in Soviet Russia, they had what's called the Holodomor, and Holodomor stands for death by starvation. So what happened is Stalin went after all of their food producers and put it into a collective, which has been my greatest fear is if we lose our small privately owned farms and ranches, what do you have left? What are the options? It's a bigger oligopoly than what we already see, right? It's worse than 85%. It's all of it. And so it's either state run or private entity that's got special interests and backdoor deals with federal, like JBS, for example, they're trying to go public. That is the worst thing that could happen in my mind, because what happens, we already know that our politicians are investing behind doors into things that they know that they have a special hand in. So now our food system is going to be even more corrupt because politicians are investors in a publicly traded company that dominates the world already, right? And so that's like the worst case scenario. So I think, in Soviet Russia, 1932 to 33, estimates 3.5 million people starved to death. And it was intentional by Stalin. Those people, by the way, were the rural farmers and ranchers. That's who starved to death. They said, we're going to put everything into the collective. Basically, it's the king's food. If you touch it, we're going to kill you. And they did. They wiped him out. And then in addition to that, it's like the Hunger Games. They surrounded these rural communities with soldiers so that they could not leave their community to go find food. And so they completely, this is 32 to 33 population numbers. We're talking, billions more people from that time. And so when we say it's going to get uncomfortable, like we're right up to the line. Like it sucks. I mean, I was playing a little clip for my kids and I'm like, what'd you think? And they're like, that's scary. And I'm like, God dang, I don't want it to be so doom and gloom, but we are right there. And with what Brooke and I are developing, part of me is like, you know what? Is it even, are we too late? But then that's just not who we are. So we're like, we're just going to keep pushing forward, because as uncomfortable as it can possibly get, what if the things that we're working on and what other people are working on is what actually helps us get through that next transition that we're facing? So let's just run it by the numbers, because this is why the optimism is really tough right now. Like Brooke was saying, in the year 2000, we had 10,000 slaughterhouses across the nation. We now have 2,500. 2,500 slaughter facilities is all we have left in our nation. The big four that control 85% of our food supply, of our beef supply chain, they roughly have only 20. So 20 slaughterhouses. These are behemoths. They're slaughtering 6,000 head of cattle a day. When one of those goes down, what do you think that does to our supply chain? That's how vulnerable we are. In 2019, a huge slaughterhouse burnt down. There was a shift in the marketplace. You could see it. One slaughterhouse that was so big, all of a sudden prices went boop. And those take a long damn time to build, by the way. You can't just like, oh shit, what do we do? Let's go build another one. Okay, yeah, we'll see that in 3 years. People are hungry right now, right? 2001, right after COVID, hackers hacked into one of the major packers. They had to pay an $11 million ransom to release their software so they could keep doing business. We're centralized. We are as vulnerable as we have ever been as a nation, and it's our food supply. Human beings, this is what we're trying to get people to understand. Human beings need three things: food, shelter, safety. Those are the three most basic human needs. And 99
people listening, water's in there with food. People are like, and
yeah.
water.
Yeah. I always hear that.
Four things.
But we need those three basic things, and most people aren't paying attention to that, right? They need their TikTok, they need their Netflix streaming, they need their Disney account, they need their Amazon Prime. Like, that's the things they're thinking about. But I'm like, you guys have no idea how vulnerable our supply chain is still. Like, after COVID, I would estimate that we're only about 75% recovered as a whole for a supply chain post-COVID. And we're still on shaky ground. So long term, yes, I have optimism. I think long term, people in this country will do what people in this country have always done. They rose to the occasion, they rallied, and they went to work, right? I think that's what we see. The question is, how bad does it get before then? Because if the Holodomor was by intention or just by poor policy that kind of led up to a bad experience, doesn't fucking matter. 3.5 million people died. Doesn't matter if it was intentional or by accident.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, sometimes I think about like, all right, if I were to red cell against the United States, how do you take it down, right? And I was just, while y'all were talking, taking down like just off the cuff notes, and one of them, of course, is destroy the food supply, right? And I think that, you know, we talk about Bill Gates, and Tony, you give him a little bit more credit than I would. Like, oh, I'm sure it's well intended. I wouldn't go so far and say that. I would say when guys are making billions of dollars, to make the assumption that like their next billion they're trying to make is like virtuous is complete shit. These guys are power hungry, and I think this is a more pessimistic view that if some of these guys they're told, hey, you can make another $4 billion from this initiative, but it's going to fuck over a bunch of other people, but you'll get even more power than you already have. They're doing it, right? So that's a classic example of like, hey, Bill, why don't you buy up all this farm land and like get all these little ranchers out of business so we can consolidate power? Oh, and then we're not going to actually ranch. We're going to start growing synthetic food and not have, you know, cows that fart now, and you know, the like climate change, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know what I mean? I personally don't believe it's virtuous at all. I think it's a pure money play and power play, right? So
well, I think it's being stuck in like a, lack for a better word, thinking he can play God.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I mean, that's an issue, and he's going to learn whether it's here or later that that's not his job. And when you have, this is an assumption, but I will be honest, I read people fairly well. And my assumption about someone like him or people in that same realm of money and power is you get these ideas, and you've also got, you know, probably all these years and people behind you just be praising you. You're the best, you know everything. And then they're following you, and you say stuff and you do it, and people are like, okay. And then you have power to almost force people to do it, right? They don't even have to consider it or question it. They don't have an option. And then all of a sudden, if you think like, no, it'd be better like this, and the world would be better like this, it's like, well, we're going to go there because I know that this is better for the world and better for America. And there's going to be some casualties, you know, but we're going to do it, and we're going to lead it. It's like, oh, then just, we'll all just go fuck ourselves then.
Yeah. And I think same thing with politicians, right? It's like, you know, I would say kind of the green initiative is another big one. It's like, okay, it seems well intended. Like if people think climate change is real, like, okay, I get it. We got to pivot to all these new like renewable energies and stuff. And it's like, okay, you think it's virtuous. People in Washington are hedging their investments in front of these subsidies they're not going to subsidize the green industry. And all of a sudden, oh, guess what? Nancy Pelosi's brother-in-law is on the board at this new green energy. You know what I mean? That's now getting pumped like hundreds of millions of dollars from the bill that she just signed, or you know what I mean? And it's like, guys,
exactly.
It's not, they don't have a strong moral compass. So stop acting like, oh, like we got to get rid of fossil fuels because like, you know, wind and solar and all these new things, you know, we got to, you know, it's like government subsidies can be good when done right, but to make the assumption that it's virtuous and it's to save, you know, society is complete bullshit. And, you know, again, that's another way you destroy a country from within. Destroy the energy sector. Convince everyone that the world is melting, so we need to get away from fossil fuels, which we know is the most reliable source of fuel, right? Get all these oil guys out of business because you make it less economical for them to actually stand up new infrastructure in the oil industry, pivot to these wind, solar, etc. And before you know it, you have no reliable energy in the country, and boom, there's another hit on you. So you destroy the food supply, you destroy the energy reliability, You teach the youth to hate America in school, right?
And
So
hate
there's-
themselves.
Yeah, and so there's no pride in country. You destroy masculinity. So when it's time to fight a war, you have a bunch of beta males that only play TikTok. You know what I mean?
And we all have mental health problems. So
And then you infiltrate. Here's another one. This is a little bit more tinfoil hat, but as these identify the big four kind of entities that control the food supply, and then you have these big actors, the Soroses, the Bill Gates, et cetera, that are able to use their financial resources to really influence policy. It's like, okay, let's red sell this for a second. What if one of these guys is getting blackmailed by another government entity, right? What if there's a video of Bill Gates doing something completely abhorrent that they've been holding over his head for 20 years, and they say, hey, Bill, here's the deal. You're going to buy up all the farmland. We're going to control you. You're a pawn. And again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you could see how easily, if I was like a non-state actor, that'd be the first thing I'd do. I'm going to go blackmail a billionaire that is heavily influenced in that society, and boom, now I'm the one pulling the puppet strings in the background, right? So again, it's like, what are the real intentions? Who's actually controlling the narrative? Is it Bill? Or is it someone in China that has a video of him doing something crazy? And that's like the wild part about the Epstein
Bill's pretty
stuff.
good with computers.
Yeah, well,
Bill could be the guy that's like, hey, I hacked into your computer and I got videos of you doing some real weird shit.
Yeah. So, and again, it seems like a stretch, but it's not that much of a stretch, right? Now, and I hope
hell no.
at our Central Intelligence Day, I hope we're doing the same shit to other countries. I hope we're, infiltrating them and blackmailing these guys. And I mean, that's how you affect your enemies, right? So I'm sure that these other countries, you can only make the assumption that every country that's against us, I mean, if they better be trying it, otherwise they're not a real adversary. I mean, I hope to God we are. And then the last one
back in 2008, you had Obama that made it legal to use propaganda against American citizens. So, that's something that changed, that was snuck in there. Why would you make it legal to use propaganda in America if you weren't going to use propaganda in America? If you wanted to tell us the truth, why would you make it legal? Why would you turn it around? Oh, I wonder if it's because you guys are just trying to make some money.
Yeah.
And you want us to only see the things that you want us to see. And that's exactly where we are.
When in there, Brooke, that's like, to me, because everything we're saying, yes, but we're almost now doing, and it's like, I'm saying this comically, like we're almost doing a little bit of what I just said is very dangerous, to project out onto the world what's wrong with the world. And it's not that we're like, these conversations are important, but I think at least my own compass for how to navigate is to turn it inward, meaning what can I do with myself and my surrounding community to embody what I think destroys everything we're talking about? Because if I do it and then another person does it in my close network, then they influence 3 people. That person influences 3 people. We have the numbers are there. So if a bunch of individuals embody, and once again, it's a compliment to you guys. If we get back, and by no means do I view it as a digression. We can't go back to what we were doing in 1400, all living in rural farms. Now we can definitely disperse, but to me, and it might sound a little overly utopian or delusionally optimistic, is that there is a way to integrate these technologies, these networks with old ancient traditions that are innate in our DNA. There's an integration that can happen where we aren't reliant on Big Daddy to take care of us. And we then all the individuals don't even have to sit and bitch about Big Daddy because they are obsolete. And I think actually Patrick Bet-David recently I was listening to, and he's a more political podcast, but he boiled it down to, and he has like a research team of 15 people for the podcast, that there are actually only 10,000 individuals. Like the people we're talking about, Bill Gates, Soros, the World Economic Forum, there's actually only 10,000 people in the entire world that are on the level of influence that they think can shift and change economies. So I say that because I think it's important for us to realize as people is that that's 10,000 people out of 8 billion. So if
there's way more of us than there are of them.
Yes,
that's why it's like we just need to come together.
Yes.
Really.
And if it starts to happen, like that picks up so much momentum. And then you see, I mean, look what the fucking group of 150 dudes did back in 1700 when they came over here from Britain. It's like it doesn't take a lot, and once that picks up steam and momentum, like it can get a momentum that it doesn't matter how powerful you are. And now there's the chaos we talk about, AJ, is that there's going to be resistance. There's going to be, but if the numbers in the just the overwhelming amount of people are in at least the same realm of thought, it doesn't matter how powerful you are at that point, because they're reliant on our energy. That's and you could look at it as money or attention. That's how we stay captured, is if our dollar and our mind, our actual like energy goes to them, that's how they stay in power. If that gets removed, guess what? They lose that.
The challenge, though, is that they do such a good job of preoccupying and creating diversions
for sure.
that these conversations are micro conversations that, like, how do you scale that so the average Joe Schmo knows what the hell we're even talking about, right?
But it's happening, and that's Joe, like even the Rogans and stuff, they're doing it.
It helps, but you know, when you're able to control the narrative, particularly with social media now, that was like the last bullet I had for destroying, you know, a country. It's like control the narrative, right? So if Instagram and TikTok control basically 90% of media that every American consumes, and all they can do is turn a dial on the back end to turn down the Brooke and the AJs of the world and turn up these ultra crazies on, you know, on the other side that are pushing blah blah, you know, this and this. Before you know it, the perceived public opinion is completely changed. And then TikTok, it's like it's owned by China. That's even crazier, because now you have an adversary of the United States that can literally control it in 2 seconds. You don't think they're baiting us all in to become addicted to a platform, and then when it's time to strike, they're going to completely change the content that's on the platform? Is that not as obvious as it gets?
But it's still about, look at somebody like Joe Rogan. If it were truly just that, he wouldn't have a voice. When the money transcends that, guess what? They're still controlled by the money. So that's why I say you get enough people.
Thank God for Rogan. Thank God for Elon Musk. Elon Musk in this world, this conversation with the Gates and the Soros, he might be our last stand. You know what I mean? Because he doesn't give a shit. And he's the one that'll go against it. He won't be like, oh, okay, let's go make another 10 billion. That sounds good. No, I think he'll do the right thing. So thank God we have guys like him in the Rogans that, like, hey, I mean, Rogan now is obviously a massive platform. So, and he's able to kind of cut against the grain and talk about, and he's, you know, I feel like he takes stances, but he also entertains a lot of different opinions. For
sure.
That's why it's cool, because he kind of opens up your mind and your own viewpoints, like Brooke's talking about. But I don't know.
It's good to see.
Yeah.
More optimism is just seeing people like that are, or like Tucker Carlson. Man, I love Tucker Carlson. But you're seeing people that had money and a job and this life, and they believe in what needs to be done so much that they're sacrificing being able to possibly take care of their family. Like, I've heard Tucker Carlson talk about it, like how much money people lose. The strikes they take, right? The strikes you get on Spotify, the strikes we get on YouTube for just saying COVID, or you can't even say certain words, you know? But I mean, hats off. And I'm so grateful for people like that are also willing to sacrifice their personal comfort, because it has to be done. I mean, and you asked me, Bear, like how I've, at a certain point, I did start like just sharing a lot more things on social media that I don't think they're controversial. They shouldn't be. They're about, you know, the health and the reality of our life, and the importance of paying attention to what is good and being humble, and it's okay to have been wrong. And here's what we got to look towards, right? I basically it was the kids for me. Oh, my nephew's watching me. One sec, Brecken boy. I have a lot of nieces and nephews. I'm the youngest of 4. And I don't have kids, and I love them so much, and they're all in school, and seeing and hearing and reading and really truly being able to objectively look at what was being done and is being done to our youth really pissed me off. I mean, I don't give a shit about who follows me at this point. I can get a job. I build businesses. That's what I do. And sometimes they work and sometimes they fail. That's what happens when you're an entrepreneur. You know, me and AJ are going after this. Could it blow up in our face? Maybe. Are we too late? Maybe. But we won't know if we don't try. And what I do know is I can always work, and I will get a job, and I do not need to be scared. You know, I think people forget that, like, we have influence, and it offers us security, financial security, and it offers us opportunity. And we become a slave to that system without realizing it. You start making little decisions based on how it will affect people that follow you. We change what we're saying because it's based on, I mean, I believe this, but maybe I won't put it out there just because I don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. Like, I'm trying to make my money too. I'm trying to pay my bills. What I came face to face with is like, I do have a platform way smaller than a lot of people. I may lose a lot of followers, and I have lost, a decent amount, and I've gained some too. But I could not. When I see what people need to do, and I see that you need to stand up, and I see that it's important that you open your mouth, I had to do it. So I'm doing it. And I'm every day, every time I post something, or I think about like, oh man, like, who might I be upsetting in like my realm of work? And I get a little bit worried because I'm like, man, it's not just me, right? Like I'm standing up, but there's people that work with me and that I work with that it could be affecting them too. And that scares me. But I truly believe like this is not a time where if I needed to be as selfless as possible, it's now. And it's not about me. It's about my community. It's about my sisters. It's about my nieces and my nephews. It's about people that I don't know. It's about families, and it matters to me. And that's why I've been basically like if I have an inclination to like share information because it was important to me, I'm like, oh man, more people need to hear this, or more people need to see this, just to consider it, just to have an idea of like what's going on. I post that shit. And then I just go, Jesus, take the wheel.
Don't look at the comments.
Let me speak to some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't read comments.
Yeah.
Post and ghost. The opportunity we have is just to create a new sandbox. I don't want to play in the sandbox they've already created. This is the fastest in human history that a food supply system has fallen apart. I mean, this has only been our system as we know it started right after World War II. The get bigger, get out, the green revolution. Like that's how long it's been around, and it's already crumbling. It's less than 100 years. We're talking in 80 years, a system that we attempted is now falling apart. Have it. It's on the way out. We're going to create something new. And the new is parallel economies, places for people who get to choose where they're going to spend their dollars and what impact that has. This is what Brooke was saying is all true. And it's why we, as an organization, we are going to grow this in a way that is not influenced by ROI as the sole decision-making consideration like that. Because I'm a capitalist. I believe in the opportunity to start a business and make money and then reap the rewards of that effort and the sacrifice and the risk. But I also believe in conscious capitalism. In other words, everybody around me that helped us get there should be benefiting, right? I shouldn't be making trillions of dollars flying around on a private jet when the people that work for me at the bottom level can't even afford to keep their lights on. Like that is not conscious capitalism. And so and also in that, if everything we do, if all the decisions we create are made around how do we make more money, we're going to make decisions that put us right back to where we control everything. Because that's why we are in the position we're in. So like Brooke and I, we're building a team with people that only believe that we should speak out for the things that matter and be damned what the consequences are, because we're not going to be self-censored, right? And we're also not bringing anybody into our ecosystem that when people choose to buy through our parallel economy, because I mean, that's the power that every individual citizen has, is where you spend your money, and that affects things in real time. And a good example of that is Beyond Meat. Impossible Burger. They tanked. They had all of this trumped up valuation that meant nothing at the end of the day, because we, the consumers, got to choose whether they were going to buy that shit. And so they fell apart. They tanked. We don't want to build a company that anybody around us is influenced by the dollar alone, because what we do know is we believe that when we build an economy like we are doing, where you can buy right from the producers that grew your food, so you know what's in there, you know that it's always going to be there. That's the other thing. Sometimes people are like, oh, you're just going to build a list for the government to go and shut them down. Well, listen, they've already got that list. But you know who doesn't? You, the citizen. You don't know where your closest farmer and rancher is. You haven't shaken their hand. You're the one who needs them, and you don't know where they're at. So what we're doing is connecting the two of you, because if there's a worst case scenario and we get wiped out by an EMP, if you've shaken their hand, you know how to find them. That's the our worst case scenario goal is that we've connected enough Americans that in the very worst case scenario, you could at least walk down the road a few miles and meet them halfway and shake their hand and thank them for the food that you're going to go put on your family's plate. And if they need you, because like a lot of people saw this video floating around of the Amish farmer being harassed by the local government, right? If that guy has a hot button to every one of the families that he is feeding, now he has a real shot to put pressure on a corrupt USDA for trying to shut him down for selling raw milk. If he's got 1,000 people he can say, I need your help, and they show up, that guy has a real shot to keep providing food for you. We are fragmented. We are split apart. If we can bring consumers together with producers, we have a real shot, and then build a company that is built on ethics and morals, so that when JBS shows up with $1 billion check, we don't have a VC breathing down our neck that says we're selling out. That ain't happening. We can't put ourselves in that position. We have an opportunity to do something. Bear, you said something earlier too about the intentions. I think the intentions are intellectual property for food IP. I think that's what's trying to be done here. If they can vilify natural growing food or things like, livestock, just like the pharmaceutical industry has done to chemical compounds, the reason cannabis is illegal, the reason psilocybin has been going through the battles, all of these natural medicines that we know heal, and then you don't need pharmaceuticals anymore. You make them illegal, and now your only option is to buy what I have the right to manufacture. That's happening with food. In India, they fought against Monsanto trying to push into intellectual property on seeds. We've had examples of that already happen in our country. There was a famous case where two farmers neighboring each other. One of them was growing GMO modified, Monsanto modified corn, and the other neighbor was not. The seeds from the GMO modified corn blew over to the neighbor's farm and started germinating. He got sued and lost because he was growing intellectual property on his property. He lost. This is what we're up against.
So it sounds like, to simplify the model, you guys are connecting the consumer and producer in a seamless manner that cuts out the middleman and makes it, it creates more economic opportunity for these small farmers. Sorry, my chocolate lab's barking at me outside. And obviously, I think that's a huge advantage for the farmers, because I would imagine some of these guys, probably they're really good at ranching, right? But they're, they maybe aren't as connected on that side of it, right? So if there's a seamless way to connect people like us, and we can go down to the farm and get it right there, that's an incredible solution you guys are offering. And yeah, I know you got a farmer guy. I used to, when I was back in Indiana, Old Man Apple, I'd go down there once a week and get my 4 gallons of raw milk. I bought a cow share, right? And he would always be in there. I'd always shake his hand and say hello, and, met his family and stuff. I would literally drive to rural part of Indianapolis and buy it, right? And I thought that was awesome. So I think it's a great thing you guys are doing. I hope you guys are able to get the word out. I anticipate maybe a challenge in reaching some of these farmers, especially if you're like, hey, Old Man Apple, we got this cool app thing. And the Old Man Apple's going to be like, I don't even know what an app is. The Old Man Apple's using a flip phone. You know what I mean? So I anticipate maybe a challenge for you guys there, but if, and of course that's for you guys to solve, but the premise of the business model is fascinating. And I sure hope it catches on, because I do think more and more people are talking, and more people, if you're raising a family, going and buying the meat from a farm 10 minutes down the road, or, even if you got to go out a little bit further, wow, that just seems like such a better scenario than buying it from one of the big four that, who knows where it came from and how it was, all that. So props to you guys. I didn't know a whole lot about this going into this, and kind of, with the notes and everything. This is just a fascinating topic. And I think it's one of many vulnerabilities that we look at when we look at our country. Like we're talking about the red cell example, we really need to be careful, because all of a sudden that check engine light's going to go on, and it's going to be too late. And then it's every man for himself. And then Thank God, you better be one of those people that is prepared. And, for me, because I have a daughter now, that's one of the things that I always think about is okay, I need to be prepared for worst case scenario. So if that does happen, I'm good. But I know most people don't think like that. They're too deep in their Netflix and being out of shape, and you know what I mean? They're not ready to E&E into the mountains and, live on MREs, and you know what I mean? Yeah. That ain't happening. And I'm, there's, the whole prepper community, all that, but I haven't gone that far, but I absolutely have a plan. And I think COVID
I wish I would have.
COVID.
I wish I would have. prepped.
was the scary one because that was the one that really kind of put me on alert because I had, of course, I have weapons and I have all these, I have stashes of money and I have some basic stuff, but by no means did I have like a plan to activate if something goes south. And it was such a silly example, but COVID, it was like the toilet paper thing, right? You know what I mean? Like, and I guess, obviously you could figure that one out, but if it had got bigger and, of course there was food supply thing, but imagine if the fatality rate of a global pandemic was 20%, right? And imagine if that had happened. What was it, like 0.001? And we don't have to get a rabbit hole of what COVID actually was. But imagine if we got a real pandemic where 1 out of 5 that got it died. Imagine the pandemonium that would kind of ensue because it's every man for themselves at that point. You know what I mean? And so that opened my eyes to, okay, hey, you need to be a little bit more prepared. But to kind of hear from you guys who are more in on one of those vulnerabilities being, kind of our food supply, it's a little bit scary, but props to you guys for standing that up, and it makes total sense. It really does. I just hope these bigger, kind of entities that can influence, like you said, I hope it's not too late, because like you said, one of these entities gets compromised, and who's to say they aren't already? Then what happens? If Bill Gates is able to convince everyone in this country that we need to stop, farming because it's affecting the glaciers melting, which is going to make the world end, blah blah blah. So therefore, we should synthetically produce this underground, and there's going to be no climate impact, blah blah blah. If he can convince 50% of our population that that's the method, and then they all vote for the idiot in the White House who then pushes it, right? Then there you go. We're toast. Yep. You know what I mean? And then the farmer, then now he's not allowed to ranch, right? Because hey, the climate change is ending. And it's like, to me, we talked about this before, but at what point do these climate change predictions have to continue to not come true until we are actually allowed to just dissent against it a little bit and say, wait, hold on, like what about all the people in the scientific world who dissent against this that aren't given a voice, right? If you look back to some of the predictions in the early 2000s, it's like in 2015, this is going to happen. And it's like, everyone's like, oh my God. And then it doesn't happen. And in 2020, this is going to happen. Then it doesn't happen. And then 2030, everything's going to be underwater. Coastal communities, these cities are going to be off the map. And it doesn't happen. It's like, all right, guys, let's take care of the environment and let's be conscious of it. But at what point are we allowed to be like, okay, what's going on here? And where it's risky is like when policy is being affected by these things, right? If it was real 100% consensus, all right, got it, let's make some dramatic changes. But when it's still, hey, that might not be a real thing. Maybe we shouldn't go away from burning fossil fuels and farming, all these things, because hey, if it's not true, then we're screwed. If at the end of the day we don't. So anyway, I'm rambling, but
it's all true.
Yeah, and there's it's a fear distraction, and I think we kicked off, or maybe it was before we were live, but. Why are we not talking about the soils? Why are we not talking about how contaminated our water has become with chemicals and plastic? Like those are the actual things that could, and there are solutions. And there, as you said, there are experts that have a voice and know 1,000 times more than I do, but it gets drowned out by an overarching fear-mongering perception that just keeps people in a state of fear, as opposed to like, hey, here's the actual things that we can change, and then here's a plan to make that happen. So.
Well, and control.
Yep.
Like during COVID, there were plenty of doctors and people that were putting out really good data and information. And what did they do? They were silenced, or they were made people think like they're an idiot, and we're going to take their right to practice medicine away, and all these things. They're conspiracy theorists. Like, we're in a situation where everything is about media, right? A bunch of consumers, and the ability to quiet someone so easily. That's the other thing, and again, like the only way to combat that, I think, is being willing to consider that someone who doesn't see something the same as you, be willing to consider that maybe they have some ground to stand on. Maybe not all of it, but might be worth looking into,
When it's sad that and it's usually a prey on like, I think a genuine caring of humans. And what I mean by that is like during COVID, like, oh, you don't care about grandma then. If you choose to believe this way, you don't care about grandma. Or in the food example, you don't care about the earth if you don't subscribe to this exact way of thinking. So it's like a gaslighting way to convince people like, no, this is it. When in reality, it's like, no, I care dearly about us as a species in the COVID example. And then I care dearly about our earth. I just don't think what you're saying is the actual solution. And that's what's sad, because in Brooke, you've said it several times. It's like, this will ruffle feathers when they hear it, but I don't want it to come across as like, oh, like we shouldn't care about the earth. It's not that. It's that the narrative that's being pushed is actually silly. And I'm sure you guys who are on the front line of caring about the earth, if you're saying that, it's like there should be a reflection there as to like, damn, why the hell are they saying this all the time then? And as soon as you start to ask that question, you start to peel back the layers. And that's what it is frustrating, though, because it preys on a very like human element of us to want to care about things. Do you know what I mean?
Spot on. Spot on.
Yeah, go ahead, Bear.
Well, I was just going to, Brooke, you brought up a good point with like, now that there's kids in the mix. And I think that same thing happened for me. You know what I mean? Because now you're looking to the next generation, and it's almost like all right, we have an obligation to alter the course here, or they're going to inherit a situation that we might not even recognize. So that was like that really resonated with me. And I don't remember if it was Sage Steele or Riley Gaines. I thought one of them said, I think, so fear is contagious, but so is courage.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sensing a changing in the tide, because more and more people are starting to speak out and realizing, oh, like other people think like this, even though I don't see it in the media, I don't see it on social media. You talk to everyone and you realize that the perception of public opinion that is being projected onto us is wildly inaccurate. And everyday good, God-fearing people, they don't subscribe to any of that bullshit. So don't be afraid to talk about it, because you are in the majority. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just because those people never talk to me. I don't know. Maybe they see this, knuckle dragon tattooed guy that, you know what I mean? But I don't know, in 5 years, I've not talked to a single person that I'm friends with that actually subscribes to any of these beliefs. So finally, and it was like, all right, guys, like, why are we all afraid to talk about it? Because the perception is wrong. You know what I mean? And I think we're starting to see that the dominoes of courage are starting to fall. And I think that will, result in a correction. And, props to you guys. And, Brooke, I know you have a big platform on social. Like you are one of those people that finally was like, screw it. I have an obligation, take it or leave it. But that makes people, the everyday person that follows you, like, oh, I'm not the only one who thinks that. Brooke thinks that's Brooke.
Well, that definitely happened.
Yeah.
When I was in Thailand, there was all kinds of shit. And every time I saw something, it was not my fault that I kept seeing banger after banger that I had to share. It was like, one day I did a video and I was like, man, it's a good thing that I don't have really sponsors, because I am a PR nightmare, aren't I? And I had put a story and I was like, hey guys, I know I've just been reposting a lot. And I have whatever. And I got the response from messages were, keep posting. Keep posting, keep posting. And I know that there are people that don't want me to post, real life stuff. And they usually send me a message that says unfollow. And I'm like, my God, okay, that's fine. But there are people way more than I think, that are awake, right? That are paying attention, maybe not as much as me, which is fine. But the people that are the loudest are the ones that are aiding, helping the problem. And so that's where I do think having more podcasts or people with influence just being willing to have the conversation, it kind of evens out the playing field. Let's get some of us talking about things that I would like to assume many people are already thinking. And they may not know the details of it, but they already know, like, their minds in the protect the children. Let's have sovereignty, food security, power to the people, not power to the government. Like, there are, I would like to assume, majority of people that feel that way. And then we see the power of media, where if you have enough money and you can get enough people to see it, and you can make something really small seem really big, and you can, certain pieces of like that event, make those the statement, make those where everyone looks, and then we forget it. We don't even question any of the other stuff because we're like, oh, that's where the story is. It's just easy to manipulate people's perception. And I think if we just, people that are listening, if you can understand that and maybe that concept, you might approach information a little bit differently. And that's just how we start. We just change the way we think. If we can change our mental behavior from being a victim or from seeing things so aggressively and negative all the time, or feeling like there's no hope, and then wanting to be I have like a hero complex, right? Like, you got to get the jab because you don't care about your family. You don't care about your grandparents. It's like, whoa, dude, Just basic human rights. There's more to it. Let's not attack somebody because they don't see eye to eye with you. There's more information. Research it more, and let's have a conversation. We just need to relax, know that it's okay if you've been doing it wrong. Know it's okay that if someone else has been doing it wrong, but give them the opportunity to change their mind. If you don't give them the opportunity to change their mind, then we're in the same place we started at. We ain't going nowhere.
And I start with, we are creating this. And I mean that as in, then it removes the whole and I said this earlier, the whole it's Bill Gates' fault. It's that, no, we collectively together are creating this, because I do believe that as we create something different, there won't be a time and place for all the bullshit fuckery that we're seeing. Meaning, if we can create a new thing together, then that other stuff can't survive. It's like a good group of friends. If you have a really solid group of friends who call each other out, but also have love, humility in that mix, you get one bonehead who tries to join that group of friends, it's not going to work. It's going to get sniffed out right away. They're going to say either you're fake or you're a shithead, and he's not going to be allowed in that friend group. That's we should hold ourselves to that type of consistency and value-based thinking, that as a species and as a country, that starts to happen, where it's hey, this jackass in Congress, we know he's a shithead. He can't be here. We should have wise people in wise roles making wise decisions. And there just isn't enough of that. But that starts at the ground roots. Once again, compliment to you guys, of people becoming more value-based, stepping into their wisdom, not because they think they're wise, but because their community thinks they're wise. Because when that starts to happen, then instead of having sociopathic egomaniacs in Congress, you have people that were elected by a group of people who were wise to say, hey, this was the wisest of our group. They should be the one helping make the decisions at the highest level. And you start to build a structure that way, as opposed to this lobbyist, money-based system. It looks completely different, but that starts with we. So that's why I lead it back to hey, we're creating this, and we are going to be the ones to change it, because there's no more pointing the finger then. It's how can you and your community affect as many people as possible? And it stops at that almost. That's your value add to solving these issues we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big initiative of what we're building, is that we have a significant number of voting population that understands the fundamentals and the values of what we're building this company around, so that when policies are trying to be made around the things that this whole group cares about, we've aggregated enough voters, enough of our population to say, wait, like what's happening in Italy. They've banned the production of fake meat in their country. That's because enough of them agree that that's a right that we're going to protect. Well, I think we have enough of them in our country too. We're just not aligned anywhere to collectively make our voice heard, or to collectively hear hey, by the way, your government's trying to bring in more beef from Paraguay. Or, hey, by the way, the government's now saying that you can put mRNA vaccine in pork and chicken. Did you know that? And they're now trying to push it towards beef. You need to start calling your local senators and say, don't let that shit happen. If enough of us can come together and be educated of what's going on, because people are so busy, they're distracted by all of these other things, whether good distractions because they're really trying to make something positive happen in their life, or they're just a consumer of information. We need to have a place where we can bring people together that can hear these things that are being put forward on their behalf without them knowing. And because most people would say, no, I'm not for that. I'm not for mRNA technology in my meat. I'm not for looking for the cheapest way to produce food. So now you're taking, a practice that's happening. And I'm not going to tell you, I don't know where it's happening, but just understand there is video evidence you can find. They'll buy candy bars and outdated foodstuffs. They'll grind it up in the packages and mix it into livestock feed, because it's a cheaper source of energy to put fat on. Well, that's why we're now seeing microplastics in our meat, because they literally fed your food garbage. And because they can't. They bought it to be cheap. They don't have anybody shucking all the candy bars out of the wrappers. They literally run it through a giant grinder, emulsify it, and mix it with the feed. And so there needs to be a place where people can learn these things. They can say, wait, and then start voting with their food dollar and just voting in general. Like, no, I do not want mRNA vaccine technology in any of my meat. I don't want lab grown meat as my only alternative. I don't want, insects as the alternative. I don't know if people know this. They're building the largest insect protein factory in the world here in our country. And they're sneaking it into ingredients that people just are completely unaware of. It's like even before this point, the dyes that are in our food that are banned in other countries, right? The reason celiac disease exists is because of glyphosate, because we have forsaken the natural cycles of growing food, and we have gotten distracted from the idea that soil health is the number one key to all human survival and life on the planet. The key to all life on planet starts under our feet in our soil. And we don't know the first thing about what makes that up. We haven't even bothered to study that. You can take a teaspoon of soil. There are more organisms in a teaspoon of soil than there are stars in the galaxy, is what they say. Like the microorganisms that make up our soil biology, we don't even understand. And yet we wrap up World War II and turn these chemical warfare tools into, food production tools, which makes perfect sense.
Crisco.
Yep.
Yeah, Crisco
Everyone knows Crisco.
Greaser. Yeah. So the awakening is coming. People are aware. Why? Because we are at critical failure. Our chronic health in our country is through the roof. When you talk about protecting the kids, all I think about is, do we really know what that means? Like, do we understand that protecting our children starts with their mental health, and that starts with what they're consuming? Like, if you don't understand microgut biology, and then you don't understand anything. And so you're raising sick human beings. Like, for the first time in history, our youth are expected to die sooner than their parents. And it is because of their environment, their food being primary, right? If you're eating processed foods or feeding your family processed foods, you are killing your family. I'm not going to sugarcoat that anymore, because some people need to be glad-handed or taken care of with kid gloves. If you're serving your children processed foods, you are killing your children. They will have diabetes. They will have chronic health issues. We used to spend 30% of our budget on our food and 8% on our healthcare. That was the average output of our expenses.
There, AJ, it's like, and people rag me for this, but once again, just something I'm getting more and more comfortable being like, I disagree with, is like, we eat organic food as a family, and people are like, "Oh, you eat organic food? You have the money." It's like,
you hippie.
It's like, yes, because it matters, guys. And here, I'll give you 400 studies that show the effects of glyphosate on the gut microbiome and leaky gut and all these autoimmune things. But it amazes me. And of course, I'm never the one, just not my personality, to sit there and scream. But people notice it when they come over. They notice if they go to the grocery store with me. It's like, those things matter, yet it's become like a laughable, like, oh yeah, it matters. Like, they're just getting your extra money. It's like, no, guys, no, this will be another thing in 10 years we look back on and say, oh my God, I made fun of people that ate organic. It's like, your food should not have a bunch of pesticides and war fertilizer sprayed on it in order to keep it alive. Like, that is going into your gut, and it's affecting the way you think, the way you feel, the way you sleep, your hormone levels. And once again, those are you can branch off into each of those and go down a rabbit hole on that, because the data is there to support it. But it's taking so long for people to recognize that, and it's sad because we've just been convinced that no, conventional crops, those things, it's good, but you do a micronutrient profile on it, and it's like, it has 0 micronutrients. So yeah, I'm jumping right back in, and I know we're already over time, so I apologize. I'm rambling.
No, this was fascinating stuff, and I think I hope people continue to get more educated, because again, you have to take the average person, and we fall into this too. It's like you're so busy and consumed with your daily lives, with your job and trying to stay fit and kid. It's like, how do you expect people to be super kind of knowledgeable on this? But I think with enough people talking about it, eventually it'll become prevailing thought, and that's when real change can happen. So to kind of wrap it up, so obviously Feed the People is the organization, and then From the Farm is the app. So how can people support right now? I mean, can I download the app right now and go find, the Virginia Beach version of Old Man Apple and start buying raw milk from him, or how does it work?
The app launches in March.
Oh, hell yeah.
So
Okay.
if you go to feedthepeoplebythepeople.com, you can get on our mailing list and be notified as soon as we go live. We have our strategic rollout. We're going to start here in Utah just to work out the bugs.
Okay.
Really all that's going to take what will be lacking for us to scale across the nation is onboarding farmers and ranchers throughout the nation. So
Okay.
the sooner we can onboard people in your area, the sooner we can help you out. Now, with that being said, we are partnered with a large USDA meat processing facility out of Utah that I'm actually chief strategist for. We're building that, and it'll be live in March as well. So we'll be able to help aggregate up until we onboard people in your area. So app comes out in March. Feed the people, buy the people. You can get on our mailing list. That way we can keep updated with you when we're going live, and people can connect that way.
And if anyone listening, or if you know somebody who owns or runs a processing facility and they are interested in, decentralizing the food supply, just like we are, get in touch with us, because we have a plan and a model set up to actually work with the processing facility as well, separate from how we're working with, we'll work with ranchers and farmers, but processing facility to be a place where we can feed even more people. We can cover more ground,
Yeah.
So if you are, or somebody, connect with us.
Yeah, I would love to. There's a couple people in my network, albeit not the biggest network in the world, that would love to make some intros. If not, and I know your guys' time is so valuable. So if nothing else, I'll just kind of educate them on this, because they're making a change here locally in Virginia Beach, and then some in a bigger way out towards Charlottesville and stuff. So would love to help you guys out in any way possible. As you saw by my ramblings, this is something that's near and dear to me. So would love to help in any way possible.
I think that just like this conversation, like there's probably, AJ is very knowledgeable too, and he's really good at explaining and giving that information. I think most people do care about it deeper than they may think, and it's just because they don't know all the nuances, But I think everyone.
There should be grace with those people, because like the whole waking up thing, it's like, guys, we shouldn't just go to people and shake them. Like, get woken up like that. What do? You're going to fight back and scream. It's like, give them, and hopefully that's what podcast, you guys being out there on the front lines, is slowly information, have humility, have grace, see their side, be able to speak to their side and say, hey, I know, I can see why you see that way, but here's maybe some differing data. There should be a softness to it, because yes, trying to shake somebody and tell them that they need to wake up is not the way to do it. So
I think that we're at a point where you can't beat around the bush, so be somebody who is going to tell you, who's going to be honest with you. And they may not like it, and they may leave and be like, you suck, and I unfollow you, and we're not friends anymore. But to also be the person that's going to be honest, but be the person that is there for when they maybe change their mind and they want to talk to you about it. And that's how do we respond? How do we sound? And that's where it's, take care, but don't put your, white gloves on for it. Like we're not at a point where we can be like, kind of tell someone like, I'm kind of want to tell you about the truth or like what's going on, but I also don't want to make you freak out. It's like, no, just from the most caring place that you have inside of your heart and inside of your body, tell them.
Agreed.
And then be there for when they, maybe it'll take a while for them to see it, but at a certain point, once you plant the seed, and that's how I feel about like sharing information on social and things like that. If I can just plant the seed, even if you get pissed at me and you want to follow me, I've planted something in your mind that now I think you're going to be more aware to when you see things pop up, or you see a headline, or you see a video, you're like, oh, now you're a little bit, it's like when someone says, have you seen any red cars today? Or you buy a new car and now you go drive and like, all you see is the car you just bought everywhere. You weren't trying to see those cars, but you keep seeing them, so just plant the seed with people and then just let that seed grow on its own.
Absolutely. AJ, you got the final word, man.
Well, I always wrap up, shake the hand that feeds you. That's the most important thing that you can do for you and your family. And if you really want to help make this different, make a difference in your communities locally, shake the hand that feeds you, be there for your producers. And And I'll just kind of repeat what Brooke is saying: become educated. Start the process of understanding those basic needs: food, shelter, safety, and how they impact you and your family and your life. And if you've got that relationship with your local food grower, that's one less thing on your to-do list when things are bad.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for your time. That was fun. I know Tony and I had some scripted questions, and I think we did like 2 of them.
I knew we were, yeah.
Bill Gates and this and that. But we went down some rabbit holes, and we'll have our tinfoil hat for the next one for sure. But no, that was fun and super insightful. So thank you both for your time. I know you're both really busy. You have an ally with us over here at Born Primitive. So if there's anything we can do to help y'all out, stay in touch. For everyone listening, feed the people, buy the people, check it out, get on that mailing list. And we will be, rooting for you guys as this thing gets launched in March. I think it's an incredible idea, and it's very good timing on this as you kind of, outlined. So thank you both. We appreciate it. And we'll be watching.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. See ya.